Jurisdiction of the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals has exclusive original jurisdiction over actions for annulment of judgment of regional trial courts. The Court of Appeals has original jurisdiction over writs of certiorari, mandamus, prohibition, habeas corpus, and quo warranto, and auxiliary writs or processes, whether or not in aid of its appellate jurisdiction. The Court of Appeals has original jurisdiction over writs of amparo, habeas data, writ of kalikasan, and writ of continuing mandamus. Also, the Court of Appeals has original jurisdiction over petitions for certiorari, prohibition, and mandamus against the RTCs and the MTCs. Under Rule 65 of the Rules of Court, or petition for certiorari, the Court of Appeals has jurisdiction against the administrative aspect of the decision of the Ombudsman and against the decision of the NLRC. The administrative aspect of the decision of the Ombudsman may be reviewed, modified, or reversed via petition for certiorari under Rule 65 of the Rules of Court on a finding that it had no jurisdiction over the complaint, or of grave abuse of discretion amounting to excess or lack of jurisdiction. Considering that a special civil action for certiorari is within the concurrent jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals, such petition should be initially filed with the Court of Appeals in observance of the doctrine of hierarchy of courts. Okay, what is the remedy against the administrative aspect of the Ombudsman decision? The answer is petition for certiorari under Rule 65 to be filed before the Court of Appeals. How about the remedy against the decisions and final orders of the National Labor Relations Commission, or the NLRC? The answer is the same, petition for certiorari under Rule 65 to be filed before the Court of Appeals. Settled is the rule that while the decision of the NLRC becomes final and executory after the lapse of 10 calendar days from a receipt thereof by the parties under Article 223 or now Article 229 of the Labor Code, the adverse party is not precluded from assailing it via petition for certiorari under Rule 65 before the Court of Appeals and then to the Supreme Court via petition for review under Rule 45. Okay, so this jurisdiction of the NLRC is further explained in the Labor Law Review module. The Court of Appeals has exclusive appellate jurisdiction over all final judgments, decisions, resolutions, orders, or awards of regional trial courts and quasi-judicial agencies, instrumentalities, boards, or commissions, including the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Social Security Commission, the Employees' Compensation Commission, and the Civil Service Commission, except those falling within the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in accordance with the Constitution, the Labor Code as amended, and other provisions of law. The Court of Appeals also has exclusive appellate jurisdiction from the decision of the MTCs in cadastral or land registration case in its delegated jurisdiction. The Court of Appeals has appellate jurisdiction over ordinary appeal in cases decided by the RTC in the exercise of its original jurisdiction under Rule 41 of the Rules of Court. The Court of Appeals has appellate jurisdiction from the decisions of the Family Court. And the Court of Appeals has appellate jurisdiction in cases decided by the RTC in the exercise of its appellate jurisdiction under Rule 42 of the Rules of Court. The Court of Appeals has appellate jurisdiction by notice of appeal from the RTC in the exercise of its original jurisdiction, except those appealable to the Sandigan Bayan. The Court of Appeals has appellate jurisdiction also by notice of appeal from the RTC where the penalty imposed is reclusion perpetua or life imprisonment, or where a lesser penalty is imposed but for offenses committed on the same occasion or which arose out of the same occurrence that gave rise to the more serious offense for which the penalty of death, reclusion perpetua, or life imprisonment is imposed. This is provided in Section 3, Rule 122 as amended by AM number 00-5-03-SC. The Court of Appeals has an appellate jurisdiction by petition for review under Rule 42 of the Rules of Court from the RTC in cases appealed thereto from lower courts and not appealable to the Sandigan Bayan. The Court of Appeals has an appellate jurisdiction by automatic review, meaning there is no notice of appeal that is necessary from the RTC in cases where the penalty of death is imposed. Supreme Court Administrative Circular 20-2005 mandates as follows. All regional trial courts concerned through the presiding judges and clerks of court are hereby directed to henceforth directly forward to the Court of Appeals the records of criminal cases whose decisions are subject to automatic review because the penalty imposed is death, or ordinary appeals by notices of appeal because the penalty imposed is either reclusion perpetua or life imprisonment, notwithstanding a statement in the notice of appeal that the appeal is to the Supreme Court. So in short, if the penalty imposed is death, there is an automatic review and transmittal of the case to the Court of Appeals. There is no need for a notice of appeal, whereas if the penalty imposed is either reclusion perpetua or life imprisonment, then a notice of appeal is required. Jurisdiction of the Court of Appeals in criminal cases. The Court of Appeals has exclusive original jurisdiction over crimes of terrorism under the Human Security Act of 2007.